This video is about inflation and its effect on property investments. Inherently, you'd think that inflation is good for property, but it's not necessarily so, and that's what I really want to look at in this video, to give you a sort of warning about inflation that seems to be coming down the line. There is then a question of whether the inflation is temporary or permanent, and I'll have a little look at that as well. I do regular updates on tax and accounting, so if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, you'll be very welcome. If you press the like button, it helps the channel, and if you write comments, I'll look at them and answer them if I can, as soon as I can. So inflation and property, you'd have thought that inflation is helpful for property if you've got a mortgage, because basically what happens is you borrow a whole lot of money and you have a property. Inflation makes the price of the property go up, but the value of the loan stays the same. And if you've got a whole load of debt, inflation makes that debt less valuable, and so you make a whole load of money. And that's the simple side of it, and that's sort of the immediate effect. But it's not quite as simple as that, because there is a cash flow effect. Because if you have a whole load of inflation, like we did in the 70s or as we went into the 80s, then at some stage the governments want to bring it under control. Now, a lot of people have lived their whole adult life with 0 or very near to 0% interest rates, but that wasn't the case when I was being brought up. We were used to interest rates that were more than 10%. And in order to control inflation, very often governments put interest rates up, and they'll put them up, and before you know where you are, you'll be at sort of 10%, no, probably not in this cycle, but you could be at 5% interest, or maybe 6-7%, who knows, depends how urgently they need to control inflation. But this is important because the cash flow becomes acute, because although your debt in an inflation environment is going down in value, you have to pay for that debt through interest, and that is a cash leaving your business. So in order to get the long-term benefit of reduced value of your debt and increased value of your property, your business has to survive in the long term. And if you've got a very high amount of debt in a property business and interest rates are going up 5, 6, 7%, then you might find that you can't find the cash to service the borrowing. And if you can't find the cash, and if at that time the banks are being very cautious, it could mean that they call in the debts and the game is over. So therefore it's really important that in an inflationary environment, yes, you do get the benefit of your debt being inflated away, but you've got to survive in the long term. And it's also worth noting that although in an inflationary environment you would expect property prices to go up, they do not go up in a straight line. So for large parts of certainly the early 1980s, property prices did not increase, although there was substantial inflation. It's because the government was controlling inflation and bringing inflation down. And what they were doing is taking money and making money more difficult to acquire. So the banks were not lending in the same way, money wasn't so easily available, and that meant that in real terms the prices of property was falling, although in nominal terms it was staying the same. So it sort of stayed the same, and then once inflation got under control, the property prices actually went up very nicely and progressively. So you've got these two things then coming into play. You've got the you've got the cash flow effect of inflation, and also you've got the increase in the property prices going up in a non-linear way, so sometimes staying the same, maybe going down a little bit, and then sometimes going up rapidly, and that it's just not a steady increase. So the next question, of course, is whether there will be inflation. The central banks are saying that there will be inflation because of what's happened. and at the moment it's very difficult to determine because demand and supply is all over the place. They're sort of out of kilter, so there's huge increases in prices of some things, and then they come down, and something bubbles up somewhere else, and there are sort of blockages and shortages in the system. Well, that over a year or two, that will all even itself out. The question is there core inflation? The central banks are telling us they're not. And I just don't believe anything these people say. I don't believe the establishment. I don't trust the establishment myself. If I was going to guess, I would say that there will be some continuing inflation. My punt would be that it's going to be like the 1970s rather than anything else, but could be as wrong as anybody else. And a lot of it depends on the policy of the government. And since I don't decide, it's a great shame, but I don't decide the policy of the government, I can't say what the inflation will be. So what do? You don't really know what the future is. And this is where having diversified investments is really important. You know, I like property. Property's an important asset class, but other asset classes are also important, and having a diversification means that whatever they throw at us, at least some of those things should work. So in summary, inflation can be good for property investment in the long term. You have to survive the long term through potentially having to pay a lot more cash out in interest, and just remember that property prices don't increase in a linear way. Keep yourself diversified, and jobs should be good. Thank you for watching my video. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, you'll be very welcome. Pressing the like button helps me and the channel, and I'll look at your comments. If you'd like to put something, I'll be very interested to see what you think. Thank you.